Tools needed for the CR80, CR125, CR250 flywheel removal. So as you can see, I've already removed it. You will need a 17 millimeter socket. You will need a 10 millimeter socket. You will obviously need the flywheel puller for the correct year and model of your engine. And it's helpful but not needed to have a small screwdriver with a magnet on the end to remove the washer that's inside the flywheel. And today I used an impact gun, but you could also do everything manually. So there's also that option as well. So if you do it manually, then you'll need a 17 millimeter wrench or ratchet for this part of the puller. And then I honestly don't know what size this is. I usually use a crescent wrench, so it might be a 19 mil. But I usually use a crescent wrench if I'm doing it manually. Hope that helps. Hey extra Kart part friends, this is going to be a quick video on how to remove the flywheel and the stator plate on a Honda CR125 engine. The one in front of me is a 1999 lower end. This will also apply to a Honda CR80 for many years, from 90s to like 2003. And it will also apply to Honda CR250 flywheels and stator plates. So, tools needed for this job. You're going to need a flywheel puller. And again, the reason I said CR80, CR125, or CR250, many of the flywheels all have the same threads and setup on the flywheel. So you'll need a flywheel puller for your specific engine. On this one, you'll also need a 17 millimeter socket on an impact. And as you can see, this one's an old dirty engine. So this one I'm parting out to throw in the clean tank. So I would normally clean the engine before I mess with it, but being it's missing the cylinder, there's damage on the piston. This engine is getting parted out for the cases and the transmission. The ignition is already sold. So what I'm doing is when I pull the ignition off, then I'll clean the ignition separately. So again, tools needed. Flywheel puller. Not a universal flywheel puller. It needs to be specific to your engine, make, model, and year, but it can cross over to many different years and engine models. So again, this puller works on a CR80, CR125, and a CR250 from about the mid-90s to early 2000s. And that nut, 17 millimeter socket on an impact. 17 mil socket, 17 mil nut. The cylinder is missing, so I'm going to grab a rag, hold the piston tightly so you don't spin the flywheel in the crankshaft and then rattle the rod inside the case. That's important. Standard thread, so we have it reversed. Standard thread. As you can tell, I already pre-loosened it. You're going to have your nut. Inside, you're going to have a little washer. That washer, sometimes it helps to have one of those little magnetic screwdrivers where you can just lift it out. So flywheel puller, the outside threads, these are reverse threads. The threads on the flywheel, reverse thread. So you want to make sure the bolt inside the puller is extracted almost all the way out. You can even pull it all the way out if you want to. All of this should be finger tight. So reverse threads, so to screw the flywheel puller in, you're going to turn it left. And all of this should be finger tight. I'm holding the camera, so I can't hold the piston at the same time, so bear with me. But make sure this bolt is out. Let's just take it out, just so you don't screw it up. Alright, so the flywheel puller is hand tight, bottomed out inside the flywheel. You're going to take the center bolt. The reason I took it out is sometimes if you don't pull this bolt out or have it far enough out of the puller, what happens is this bolt will bottom out on your crankshaft. Then you're not going to get the full amount of threads on the puller inside the flywheel. And that's when you run into problems, and then you hit it with an impact gun and you strip everything out. So, on this particular flywheel puller, That's a 17 millimeter. The nut we pulled off is also 17 millimeter. I'm not going to do it in the video because I need to hold the piston so it doesn't rattle around and then hit it with an impact. But just know I'm going to use my impact, standard thread. You're going to tighten the bolt. The bolt is going to go through the middle of this part of the puller. It's going to hit the crankshaft, and that will remove the flywheel. So I just hit it with the impact. I tighten this bolt. That's going to lift the flywheel off the crankshaft. Now, for some of you, on the Honda CR125s, if it's a blueprinted engine, I should have said this earlier, make sure you check the timing. So hopefully you watch this video one time before you actually just jump into it and start doing it. Check your timing. I used to work in an engine shop for Sweet Tech Racing for a number of years, and people would just pull their shit apart, not know what they're doing, then they would call us, where should I set the timing? And it really just depends on the engine. But always, if you're able to, this one, it's pretty easy. It's a Honda. Everything's keyed. There's a little bit of adjustment on the plate itself as far as how much you can advance, but it's very minimal. But on some engines like a TM, Pavesi, the other engines that may not have a key inside the flywheel, see that one has a key, this one has a, so that's pretty set and indicated to the crank itself. But if you have a flywheel that doesn't have any indicators, you need to check the timing first. Otherwise, when you put everything back together, you'll be playing a lot of guessing or calling a lot of engine shops. So flywheel is off. That's it. Now we have the stator plate. And at this point, it's a good time to look for damage. Look inside your flywheel for any scrapes or debris. Look on the outside here. That's the pickup. So that sets the duration of the timing, the direction of the rotation. Make sure that both sides are nice and sharp and not rounded off or ground or hit. A little bit of rubber from a go-karting application sometimes gets on the flywheel and smears it. You also want to look at your pickup. There's your pickup right here. Make sure there's no damage on the pickup. Make sure there's no damage on the coil wires. And what we're going to use here is 10 millimeter. 10 millimeter. Those two bolts are going to remove from the case. And then the stator plate itself will easily lift out. And then just work, just kind of work with this rubber grommet as well. Keeping in mind, keeping all your wires nice and free. All right, so the stator has been removed from the cases. Again, those two bolts, it's a 10 millimeter socket in most Honda applications for the years I mentioned. So 10 millimeter socket, unscrew, standard thread. Sometimes the plate will get stuck on the case right here, but you don't need to hammer it or pry it. It's just a little bit of a wiggle, lift it up. Being careful for your wires. There you have it. So that was pretty simple. How to remove a Honda CR80, CR125, or CR250 stator plate.